All right, everybody. I've got another very special guest, a returning special guest. Very welcome back to the show, Charlie Stickney. Welcome, Charlie.
Thanks, Chris. I love being on your show. I mean, like, there's sometimes you do the podcast circuit and you're like, I need to do this show. And then there are other times like you do a podcast circuit, and you're like, I am excited to be on a show. And I'm always excited to see you and to hang out and talk comics with you.
That makes me happy because I love when you come on the show because I feel like I learn something new every time we talk on the show, every time we talk off air. You're just one of those dudes that knows so much about the industry, has been the in the trenches with Scout, and then now on your own doing your thing. It just, yeah, you're one of my favorite people in comics right now.
Oh,
So
I appreciate that. And I assume that you're in a good mood. I see the Eagles hat. Is that the Eagles hat on? So that they're off to a great start this year. Congrats on that.
Yeah, a little disappointing on the Phillies this year, but
Yeah.
and I did the Homer Simpson meme, and I went right back in the bush and came out with my Phillies hat or my Eagles hat. So
There you go. I wasn't going to bring that up. We always try to lead with the best foot forward. Uh, but you have to love being in a position where you can have two or three teams from your city being potentially in the finals. And the Sixers have a chance again this year. You have the reigning MVP, so it's not a bad time to be a Philly sports fan.
I say a lot. I've been a spoiled sports fan because the Phillies have been really good most of my life. There's down years and whatnot, but they won a World Series 2008. And then the Eagles have been pretty much relevant since I was in middle school.
It's a
So
wonderful place.
yeah, like I'm spoiled rotten in terms of sports realm. So I try not to complain too much, but I do get pretty angry at those into losses, especially the Eagles.
And now that we've lost half of our comic book people, let's bring it back to comics.
I say all the time, there is definitely a emerging there in terms of those realms. Like, dude, my fantasy football league takes place in a comic store. Like,
That's great.
yeah, that and I'm just gonna come out here and be me. Like, that's one of the things I love. It goes comics and then football. Like, it's so if you don't like listening to it, I guess I don't know what to tell you. But
Well, I will say that like the thing that I learned when I sort of came back to comics was I was just shocked how many comic fans were into wrestling. Right? Like
yeah,
I was into comics growing up, but like wrestling was just that crazy world that I had no interest in. It wasn't really a sport. It wasn't really a performance. It was its own thing. And now it's like, oh, comic book people love wrestling too. And I guess it's kind of like superheroes, and there are stories and the dynamics of the saga and the soap opera. So like,
yeah,
yeah, I get it. I get it. But like it
it's
was just sort of had to take that in.
yeah, it's a soap opera with giant muscular men and women in tights fighting each other. Like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, yeah. You have
Uh,
villains, you have heroes.
yeah, and then some go from villain to hero and vice versa. Like,
Yes.
yeah, I get it too, but I've tried watching it a few times. I'm just like, I don't understand it, but
It's
to
not
each
me.
their own.
Exactly. If it works for you, wonderful. I just to show my colors, I grew up in New England, so I'm a New England sports fan. When I was young, we had some good times. Then there was a very long stretch, like being out in the desert, as a Patriots fan. And then when I moved to LA, this young man named Tom Brady took over the team. And boy, we like for a week or two, we were devastated because Drew Bledsoe was gone. And then things changed. So like I know that ride of living in the moment and being like, oh my goodness, we have a good team. And even if we're a little nervous, we're nowhere near as nervous as the people who have to play our team. Right. And so, enjoy that ride. I hope it lasts, at least half as long as it did for the New England sports fans.
Yeah, I hope, obviously I hope so as well.
Yeah.
So we did the sports talk, everybody. So
Yes.
let's definitely move on to comics because
Yes.
we were talking a little off air about some stuff, and there's so much going on in all of comics, and we on the show we talk about everything that's going on in the industry weekly. So I keep up with a lot of this, and hopefully the listeners gather something from my thoughts on it. But I'd love to start with, you're now in the realm of Kickstarter, like that's your kind of your bread and butter. where you're living and breathing. How do you feel about the service today as opposed to when you started however many years ago?
Well, so I think for people like let's just assume your audience knows Kickstarter,
Mhm,
but if they don't, at this point, it's become the third biggest bucket for comics. You have, in terms of sales channels, you have the direct market, which is one very large sales channel. You have the bookstore market, which is a very large sales channel, and you have Kickstarter, which I mean, you could say that there's also the digital marketplace, but I really don't feel for a lot of independent publishers, it's anything but really advertising. Like just the amount of revenue that's generated, at least when I was at Scout, was could buy you a cup of coffee.
mhm,
Versus these other channels, and especially for independent creators, Kickstarter has become such a big thing. So for me, even though I was at Scout for a while, before and afterwards, and in the middle, I was always building an audience on Kickstarter. And the platforms had a lot of evolution. When I first started looking at it and building my first project, it was 2016. We launched in 2017, and that's where I started building my brand of White Ash, of Glarien, and all of that. Uh, at that time, it was still a little bit of the Wild West. There were some good projects, there were some bad projects, but there were still plenty of people who were there because they couldn't get a publisher. And so it was by default. And what's evolved over the last 7 to 8 years is Kickstarter has gone from the default I'm not good enough minor leagues to the place where a lot of creators who own their own projects are choosing to go over publishers. I mean, on the high end, you look at something like Neil Gaiman, who just did the Good Omens Kickstarter, right?
mhm.
And he talks very openly about it. He was looking at the publishing deals that were being offered, and I would have thought he would have gotten an amazing publishing deal. But he said he basically had tepid interest from publishers to take that book out, which again is very short-sighted if that was the case. And he decided to do it this way. And obviously it was a huge success. I think it raised over $3 million on Kickstarter, which is good. For any comic in any market, like that's a lot of money. And in this case, 90% of it went to Neil and his team. So again, good choice. Um, so on the high end, you have creators like Neil Gaiman who are choosing Kickstarter over other places. You have creators like Michael, myself, who have built a large audience there, who choose that. And part of that is the industry right now is going through it's going through things. And by those things, I mean, it's going to be readjusting because during COVID there was a huge boom. A lot of people were stuck at home. They had disposable income. They started buying things. The collector's market boomed again. And so there was a lot of expansion that maybe was not being supported by the normal levels of the marketplace. So a lot of shops overextended, a lot of publishers overextended. And now we are going through things where the market is recalibrating itself. And there were also a lot of publishers that came into the comic space over the last 10 years who were not relying on publishing revenue as the source to keep their companies liquid. They had giant venture capitalist funds because their mandate was more develop products that we can then sell as IP to film and television and the streamers. So in addition to like the COVID bubble having popped and stores kind of returning and customers figuring out how much they can spend now, student loan payments restarting, and all of these things with the economy, that there's less, the economy is a little bit less flush with disposable income. On top of that, we had the writer's strike, which has been followed by the actors' strike. So you've had 6 months where the studios, and even in preparation of that, were kind of tightening their spigot in terms of what they were optioning. So a lot of that IP money that was supposedly going to sustain these companies got turned off. And now these venture capitalist funds are looking at it and saying, you know what? We're not really getting a return on that investment. So they're cutting off these publishers. We're not giving you round 3 of funding because round 1 and 2 didn't do what it was intended. There's no other franchises out there that are the Avengers, right?
Mhm.
Like in terms, like you just like DC has their universe, but they would have had their universe regardless. Marvel has their universe. How many independent hits that are built from these smaller companies that were funded by venture capitalist companies are taking off, and it's really none. So like some of that money is being pulled back, and these publishers who never had a business model that was sustainable by the amount of titles they were selling in the marketplace are now hurting. Um, and also because before that they really didn't have to worry about sustainability from publishing revenues, they were pumping out lots of books because all of them were lottery tickets. So the market was being flooded with too much content. Normally in a healthy ecosystem, the publishers put out what they can sell and the stores pay for what they can sell. And it's a nice, like there's a nice sort of cycle there because the market slowly grows or contracts based on demand from customers. So with the publishers putting out all these titles, the stores had to assume that there were people there to buy them because otherwise how could these publishers afford to put out all this content? And so they were going all in on these titles and getting too many, and so then their shelves were filled with books that wouldn't sell. So anyway, we're having like this come to Jesus moment right now where the stores are like, hey, we can't afford to keep doing this. They're pulling back with what they're buying. A lot of stores, if it comes to an independent title, or even some Marvel and DC, if it's not Batman family or X-Men or Avengers, they're just ordering to pull, which I'm sure your customer and most of your viewers know, but it's like they will only order that book if someone walks into their store and says, I want this issue. So the numbers have dropped dramatically in terms of what stores are ordering, particularly from the smaller publishers. So, where a number one might have sold anywhere from 3 to 8,000, now it's selling from 2 to 4,000. And a number two is selling anywhere from 700 to 1,500 to 2,000 at some of the smaller publishers. And that's not a sustainable model. All of a sudden, those issues go from having small to medium profits to either no profits, breaking even, to in the red for every issue. So again, there's market contraction. And with those numbers declining, what it's causing a lot of creators to do is say, wait a minute, if I can't make money in the direct marketplace, where can I make money? And a lot of them are saying, oh, that Kickstarter place that people have been talking about for the last couple of years, that's where I'm going to go to make money. And so over the last 3 to 5 months, we've seen a surge in the number of projects that are on Kickstarter. And that has ballooned up. I was just looking this week; it was it's going between like 340 and 350 projects on Kickstarter this month. And if you think about that in terms of relationship to the direct market averages between like 350 and 450 new titles every month. So we're talking about something that's almost the exact same size of the direct market in terms of the amount of content that's being put out. And if you look at total number of covers as units sold, Kickstarter versus the direct market, there are more unique entries because there's so many projects that have anywhere between 6 and 25 covers. And only Dynamite does that kind of craziness in the direct market. There are actually, in terms of like individual comics that you could buy that are unique, that are coming out in a month, there is now more content on Kickstarter on a monthly basis than the direct market, which is just crazy. That said, I think Kickstarter has reached a saturation point where some of those it's a little bit harder, especially for new creators, to break into Kickstarter. There's a little bit of the market eating itself on Kickstarter, where just overall some of the numbers are down. Now, I always thought that Kickstarter never had a cap because theoretically, anytime a new project launches, that creator is bringing in their own set of backers and fans. And so the entire marketplace expands for every project that you have that's live on Kickstarter. Unlike the direct marketplace, where if Marvel puts out 10 titles, that doesn't mean there's 10 new fans that come into the store. It's marketing to the same fan base. However, what's changed, and this is going back to another thing that's changed on Kickstarter, is it used to be a sole creator would launch anywhere from 1 to 4 titles a year, maybe 5 Kickstarters a year. And each of those creators were usually just doing different books. They used to be just trades or one-shots. And then people like me came along who are crazy and said, I'm going to serialize on Kickstarter, like the direct market. And so that over the last couple of years has become a thing. But the newer thing that's happened is you have creators who have built large enough brands on Kickstarter where they're doing multiple projects a month. They have one or two different publishing labels on Kickstarter or different accounts. And so rather than a creator doing 4 Kickstarter projects a year, now they're doing 3 every 2 months or 4 every 2 months.
Yeah.
So rather than them bringing in new fans, now their projects are outnumbering the number of fans they're bringing in. So that's where I think, we're starting to hit a little bit of regression, because it's not more projects equals more fans. It's more projects just equals more projects. And so now you have more content on the platform and less new blood being brought in to support the content.
Well, I definitely still see out there in the wild, like there's always been this split of like direct market comic fans and Kickstarter comic fans, and then it's a Venn diagram of somewhere in the middle is people like me who do both.
Yeah.
But you definitely have people on both sides of that who are like, I don't do that, or I don't do that. And I think it's, I don't know, maybe you could, but I think it's I don't see some of them ever crossing over, because it reminds me so much of everything in today's world. But I'll bring it to something less serious, like video games, where you've got your PlayStation fans and your Xbox
Yeah.
fans, and they hate each other for no reason, but their plastic box is better than the other one. And I see that in comics too, where it's like, well, it's a Kickstarter book. I was like, and for instance, with your book White Ash, I'm like, yeah, it's a Kickstarter book, but it's going to be on, was on the shelf through Scout at one point, and then it's a direct market book. So what's the difference between that one and that one? Because it's the same book, it just has a different cover and has a different label on it, and they can never really answer that. But they'll buy the Scout one, so it's weird to me, and I just wonder if you'll ever get some of them to cross over. In your case, the direct market people to get into Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And some people said to me, and I personally fought against this and still am not a fan of it. But when Boom and Valiant, sorry to call you out, came to Kickstarter and said, "Here's our big Kickstarter campaign," and I was told that was going to drag them in, and it just seemed to not do it to me. Maybe you disagree, but
Well, like, look, the Valiant is a separate issue, because I think Valiant has not even delivered their Kickstarter, right? Like, that's
yeah,
like
yeah,
that's not helpful. Like, you're not going to bring any new fans in when you're like, here's this Valiant book, and then we don't deliver it. Um, I think there's a couple of things. People become tribalized no matter what it is.
mhm,
I think it's just human nature. You feel safe. You know what you understand. Uh, when I had White Ash out, I was doing a lot of the stores here, doing signings at a lot of stores here in LA, and there were plenty of people who were not, didn't even want to look at me because it wasn't a Marvel or DC book, and that's
yep,
all they bought, right? They don't deal with those image, the indies, even the image, like that's not real comics. Real comics is Marvel and DC. So you have segmentation even in the direct market.
yep,
Like I had a guy who came over, was like, "This looks really cool." He's like, "Your art is great. I only buy Marvel and DC." Like, he said that to me. I was like, "Okay." Like, you do you, you be happy with the characters that you're happy with. So I don't think that polarized segmentation is anything that you can do that much about. However, I think one of the things that's great is the Kickstarter marketplace initially, in a lot of ways, sprang up to support the kind of stories and books that were not selling well in the direct market. So basically, a lot of things other than superhero books. And there were more LGBTQ books. There were more POC books than that were focused on those things. And for a lot of people who can't make it to a comic book shop because of where they live, or they don't feel welcome in their comic book shop, it provided another avenue and a type of stories to create. So I think just inherently in how the market evolved, it's a different type of content in terms of its orientation. It also has a lot at this. The other thing that's really happened is you have a lot of these high-end art books, hardcovers, and things that go on Kickstarter because they're a little bit more of a premium price point. And the direct market is built around that disposable 3.99 or 4.99 issue. So one is like this disposable, I can get 4 books for 20 bucks versus I'm going to get the premium version of 1 book for 20 bucks, or one hardcover. So they are hitting different markets. So I think where that Venn diagram is going to cross are for the consumers who want things from different buckets. Like if you are someone who loves Marvel and DC and you're willing to have 3 or 4 indies, which are the biggest ones, maybe you like Hellboy and Saga, or you like Hellboy and you liked Invincible or Walking Dead, like if that's your entire pull, you're probably not going to come to Kickstarter. But someone who is dabbling in a lot of the independents, I think those people will find that they will find a lot of content that they really like on Kickstarter, especially as more of those creators are moving over because they realize it's harder and harder to be profitable in the direct market through some of those smaller publishers. And if they want to tell those stories and sustain them, Kickstarter is the place they're probably going to go.
Yeah, I always wonder a little bit about that because you see the old model was you make your bones. I'm just going to use Marvel as
Sure.
for instance, but you make your bones at Marvel. I think of Ed Brubaker and that crowd. And then once you're done doing your big Marvel books and you make your splash, you make your name, you then go over to an Image at that time. And that's when you can make your living off of your independent book. And then just to keep with the Ed Brubaker example, because it's a creator I love and I followed him a lot. He even said at one point, he's now doing the OGNs, and he even said that, listen, I put out a new criminal. Number 1 sells X, and number 2 sells nothing compared to number 1. So if everybody's going to just buy it once and then drop it, I'm just going to put out the OGN and make you buy the whole series. And I think Brubaker could do that. He's a big enough name, and we all know that him and Sean Phillips together is magic.
Yes.
But let's pick on a friend. Travis Gibb couldn't go out and say, "Hey, buy my trade of this at $25. Trust me, it's good." It probably is. I love Travis, but it, he's not Ed Brubaker.
Right, right. And like what Brubaker has is he has a fan base
Yeah.
and he has the bookstore market. And so a lot of those books sell really well through the bookstore market. They sell well through Amazon. And so he's going to move enough units in that market to make back his investment, to make sure he and Sean Phillips are paid for the time they put into it. And that's the kind of book that will sell, you know, it's an evergreen product. As people get into Brubaker, they're going to want to go back through his whole library and see the other things that he has. But yeah, like the direct market has become really tough after the first couple of issues to sustain a series. And this is another thing where the paradigm of Kickstarter works a little bit better because every time you launch a product, like right now I have Glarien 1 through 3 that's live on Kickstarter. So anyone who's new to what I do can immediately catch up on this mini series from the beginning. And comic book shops don't have the shelf space to be able to have 1 through 3, and they don't want to over order 1 through 3 because they don't want to be stuck with all these number 2s if they don't sell, right?
Yes.
And so quickly as the series goes along, there's maybe some 1s left over, but now you have 1s and 3s on the shelf. And like, I don't want to, if I can't get number 2, do I want that series? So it's again, it's just a different dynamic and way, and paradigm for selling comics. And so like I have Glarien 1 through 3. I also, as Glarien is a spin-off of the larger White Ash universe, I have a package where you can catch up with all of the White Ash books and all of the Glarien books. And so almost like manga, where it's easy, here's volume 1, here's volume 2, here's volume 3. Creators who are doing well on Kickstarter, who are serializing, usually make it so anybody new to it can catch up from the very beginning and get everything. And that's really hard to do with single issue comics through the direct market. So it's a different way that the markets function. And so you're able to tell longer series on Kickstarter. At this point, my White Ash series is the equivalent of about a 20 issue run through the direct market because the books are so big and the things that we've done. And like when you think about the number of creators who could do an independent comic for 20 issues at this point, there aren't that many, right? Brian K. Vaughan can do it. Scott Snyder can do it. But like, when you start going down with the list of even at Image, how many creators are going to be able to be sustainable for a 20 issue series? Maybe there are 10 right now that are working in the market that could do it. But on Kickstarter, there's a bunch. You look at someone like Pat Shand, who has his Destiny New York Empire. At this point, he's done 6 trades that all range from 150 to 200 plus pages. And, like that's a lot for an independent creator just to be telling one story. And, it's sustainable. And so when it can be sustainable for an independent creator, when you're looking at the different markets, it's something to really consider. What kind of story do you want to tell? Do you want to tell a 4-issue miniseries? Is your goal to get on the shelf space in the direct market for collectors to see you, to use this as a stepping stone to maybe get that big 2 work that you really want to do? Like, then yeah, by all means, go do that. But if you have this story that you want to tell that you think is going to be at minimum 12 issues or 15 issues or 30 issues, or in my case, like 60 issues, you need to find the market that's going to support that. And it can be done in a place like Kickstarter. And you see there are numerous books that are going past 10, 15 issues of the same series from independent creators that no one probably has heard of, and that's totally fine. They're telling their stories, they're being able to do it in a way, and and long term, more people are going to find them. They're like, oh my god, this Mistonic High is on issue 22 of this series, and he puts out a new one every 2 months. This is great. Like, there's a whole universe I can get into here. And again, from creators that a lot of people in comics don't know as the big names, they're able to sustain series in ways that the big names can't. So, something to consider.
Do you think that, so stick with Pat Shand and Destiny, do you think it's smart for someone like that to go out and then ink the publishing deal and get it in the direct market? And do you think that that leads to anything on the Kickstarter end, or is that just an extension of the book's reach?
Well, I think, yes, there's definitely some that cycles around, where if, like, Pat does have a deal through Black Mask, and Black Mask has been putting out those trades as single issues, and
Mhm.
it's been something they've been doing, and he's actually landed a TV show because of Black Mask's multimedia contracts. And so there is a Destiny New York TV show that's in development. Knock on wood that one down the road will get made. So I do think there's definitely some benefit in having things out in both markets. I know when White Ash was coming out in the direct market through Scout, we definitely increased our brand awareness in a way that helped, going back to the Kickstarters, and people coming to the Kickstarter may have seen us on the shelves of the stores, or just by the nature of having that direct market publisher putting their stamp of approval on it, real or otherwise, gave a validity to the project that might not have been there without it at one point. And I think that really helped me grow the brand for a little while. What I would say is, if a creator has been doing things through Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whatnot, or whatever their direct to consumer platform is for a while, and a publisher approaches them, you know, they need to be very careful about the deal they sign. And remember, what you're doing already is just as valid. You are publishing your own work, you are building a fan base, people love you, right? And then you've built something sustainable. And that, don't be attracted, don't be blinded by the allure of having those books on the shelves in the stores to sign some kind of deal that takes advantage of, that person in you who is the huge comic book fan who has been longing for this your entire life. Remember, you've created this content, you've paid for it to be created, and that you should sign a deal that makes sense with that in mind. You shouldn't be giving away too many of your rights, if any of your rights. You shouldn't be giving away too much of a percentage of the book. So anyway, I just think that there's a lot of predatory publishing deals out there who take advantage of creators who are excited to be on the shelves of the direct market, when, especially with what the numbers are right now, I don't know how much of a boon that is to a creator anyway, besides that internal satisfaction that you get of having your book on the shelf in the store.
Yeah, I definitely I've heard some stories behind the scenes about some of the predatory practices, and it's unfortunate. Um, but something you said in a prior conversation, we when it comes to Kickstarter, because it's something I thought about a lot with certain creators I know and people from friends with behind the scenes. And you, from what I've seen, you've put out a few different things through Kickstarter, but like primarily you are doing the White Ash universe, and you've been pretty consistent with putting that out, and then maybe throwing a thing in here in between. And then there's other creators who tend to jump around, and it can take years for their books to finish. And I understand some of that is artists take time, artists get delayed, stuff like that. But for the most part, all things being even, assuming we're living in a perfect world, do you think it's better to go with the route of having the like finish your series and then do the next one? Especially if you're doing like 5 issue series or something. Or do you think it's okay to kind of jump around, or could that be part of the problem that some creators are seeing right now?
So I think it comes down to who you are
Mhm.
and what brand you're trying to build. And I hate using a term like your brand, and because some creators just immediately like put up their shields. Oh God, like I don't want to hear about my brand. I don't want to hear about business. I just want to create this art, and I had this idea and I have this idea and I have this idea. And that's great.
I always say, too bad you live in the real world. You have
Right.
a brand. Like,
Yeah. And so, but I think it comes back to that is in any marketplace, you need to establish yourself.
Mhm.
And beyond the book, there's the whole factor of trust of, in terms of being able to deliver, in terms of the quality of the content you put out. Uh, you know, and Kickstarter also has a little bit of who are you as a person, because with a lot of campaigns, like I always put myself out as the face of the campaign. So this is very much tied into the brand of White Ash and Glarien. Uh, but to answer your question specifically, I think if you have something that's working, lean into that, build that up to the point where it's the brand that you can jump off from, right? Like for me, I did the first arc of White Ash before I did anything else. Then I started trying the game. Then I had the Glarien spinoff. White Ash was continuing, but like it was all here's White Ash, here's a White Ash spinoff. It's all part of the same universe. So you know that your fans from this will go to this. Um, when I started my fourth series, How I Slept My Way Through College and Other Tales from Freshman Year, I knew it was a very different series. It
Mhm.
wasn't fantasy. It was grounded. It was set. It's like very different. And so I didn't have the expectations that the White Ash fan base would jump over to this new book. And I think that's what, as a creator, you have to have is realistic expectations. If and that's why it helps to have your core brand, because if you know what you're going to get with a White Ash campaign or a Glarien campaign, you can plan your budget for the year around those one or two Kickstarters that you know will do X. And that's what I do is like I know I can make at least this much money from these campaigns, which let me try some other things, but I'm going to keep building the core audience around the moneymaker. But it's also my baby, so like that makes it easy. Like the thing that I love is the one that took off and that people love. But I do see like the game is the fan base of that is starting to grow as well. We just did over 1,000 backers in the last campaign for that. And How I Slept My Way Through College, that's up to like 700 and something backers. So these campaigns are growing, but you just have to have different expectations. So I think if you jump around too much, it's really artistically fulfilling, and I understand that, but it makes it harder for people to know, oh, that's the person who does that, or remember, oh, you did this book I like. I don't remember that because you did 8 books in between that I didn't like or weren't my thing, and I don't remember who you are, right? And so like for me, it was easy when I did the game. It's like from the creator of White Ash, we bring you this, and so like you have that brand that people know in a space that you can use to launch other things.
Yeah, I've seen a few people struggle recently that didn't struggle in the past, and one of the things I brought up to them was as a consumer on the outside looking in, and someone who's a little bit more into the weeds than your average person, but still not as much as like a creator like yourself would be. I it it's rough when your 4-issue miniseries takes 4 years to finish,
Yes.
and that may not be your fault. And I try to be I try to be understanding while at the same time just pushing reality out there. Like it may not be your fault, but from the outside looking in, it's like, why did it take 4 years? And you did these other projects in between. So like you did White Ash, and then you did Big Game, and you did this and you did this and that, but you didn't get to White Ash issue 2 until year 2. And my question is why? As a consumer, I feel like other consumers are thinking the same thing. And that's where I always come back to is like what you did, maybe you should have done White Ash Volume 1, finished it, proved that you could finish it, and then maybe moved on and done all that. That's my thoughts on that
Yeah,
and how
I
it looked.
think it also depends on how long the issues are. If it's
Yeah.
a 20 to 22 page issue and you're only doing one of those a year, it becomes harder to build a fan base. You need to,
Mhm.
because it's something that's read very quickly. Like I've taken like the Glarien issues have taken longer than I would have liked, but I'm working with an artist who's amazing, but she's a little slow. But every issue of Glarien has been between 36 and 44 pages, so it feels like there's some real content there.
Yeah.
And then you can also buttress it with, oh, and there comes another White Ash issue, and then here comes another Glarien thing, and so there's always content coming out, and that reminds you that there's more of this other content versus something that's a very separate project. So yeah, I do think it comes down to engaging your core audience, making them aware that there's more of this content coming, and how are you going to build off of that content.
And so for somebody getting into Kickstarter today for the first time, wants to build they want to be the next White Ash. Do you think that's still possible? And if so, what's your advice to that person?
Uh so let's assume they have a really good comic,
Yes.
because I think if you're starting from a place where you don't have a really good comic, you can always have dreams of doing things. I think if they have a really good comic that checks the buckets that do well on Kickstarter, uh, over time, I think they can build a large audience, even if they're a creator that no one's heard of before. And they need to start small, have realistic expectations, but just keep putting out content. You need to. It's basically that wash, rinse, repeat approach. Here's this issue. I put it on Kickstarter. Your first one's mostly going to be supported by friends and family and the new backers that that Kickstarter can bring in. You do that, and then hopefully, what you need to also have is a really good hook at the end of the first issue, so all those people who read it want to come back for number two. I read a lot of independent comics that have a hook at the end. Like it needs to be that thing that makes you sick to your stomach that you don't know what happens next, right? And it's Brian K. Vaughan is someone who does it really well, right? You
Mhm.
want to read that next issue. Your stomach drops when you know it's coming. You know that splash page is coming at the end of every single issue of Saga or whatever, and it still hits, right? And so being able to do that's really helpful. And then getting to know the Kickstarter community who can help support you and lift you up. Because I do think in independent comics, there is definitely a community that wants to support newer creators, because we've all been there. We know how hard it is to sort of get started. And if you are a good person, if you're supporting other projects, if you're an active member in the community, people are going to look out for you. And then ultimately, good content does well. It's the same thing in any industry. As long as you keep doing it over time, people are going to find you. The fan base is going to build, and you eventually will be able to, have something sustainable. But you can't sort of come out of the gate and say, "Hey, I'm going to have this $50,000 a campaign Kickstarter in year two. For me, I mean, we're at year, it's like 6.5, year seven of building something. And I was looking from the beginning of not being profitable until my third Kickstarter. Like everything before that was going to be investment. If I hit my goal, if I went over, if I hit the point where I might be breaking even on a campaign, I was going to invest in overprinting so I had stock. So going forward, when I did White Ash 1 through 3, I wasn't having to reprint the first and the second issue. Those were already sunk costs. And so when I was able to offer that bundle at a more discounted price, more people jumped on. And so I was making it attractive as we went forward to people to sort of check out what I was doing, and cheaper. Like even with like Glarien right now, this is over 100 pages of content, and we have a catch-up tier which has the issues, and it's fairly cheap compared to the Kickstarter prices that you would see for something similar, because I can sort of amortize those costs, because from the beginning I've looked at it as a long tail business. When you're not cashing out with each Kickstarter, you're rolling back those profits into it. You're making sure what you're doing is sustainable, and you have to function as a micro publisher. It can't just be, I'm doing this thing and oh my goodness, I made $2,000 and now I'm going to go, I don't know, go to the CGC store and blow all of that. So,
Have you seen? I've noticed in Kickstarter world, and I mean, I shouldn't even say Kickstarter. I've noticed in the world that things are more expensive. I don't know if you've noticed this,
yes.
but especially in Kickstarter world, since we're focusing on that, issues got more expensive, and I know that printing's got more expensive, and this and that. Have you noticed any? I don't want to say backlash, but has there been less people coming to you? Has there been some people like, I used to get every cover, but like,
Yes.
dude, do you see what gas is now? I can only get one. Have you seen that kind of stuff going around?
So I'll be completely frank. This campaign, I've definitely seen people who go digital who would have gone physical before. I've seen people who get one cover who might have gotten two or gotten the bundle that gets all six. So I would say my per pledge average is down a little bit. Um, I mean, it's about finding what the market will bear,
Mhm.
and pricing for that. I don't think, depending on the book, I don't think Kickstarter books are actually that more expensive if you compare apples to oranges. Like apples to apples. Like if you were to take a Marvel comic, let's just say Spider-Man, whatever, and say I'm only going to print 5,000 of these. What are they charging for that book? Right? Like that. And I know that's not completely fair because that's Spider-Man, but that would be such a low print run Spider-Man at 5,000 copies. That's gonna blow up the price, right?
Yeah, I
And
think with that, I mean, you use Spider-Man, so it's tough, but the bigger book supports the little book,
right,
so they can keep them the same.
right. So,
Yeah,
but like that's Marvel. But I'm like,
yeah.
even if you like, so if you go though and you start thinking, okay, there's this, like, say, look at a store exclusive cover. What are you going to pay for that store exclusive cover where they only print 200 to 300 copies, right?
Yep.
Now most people go in, oh, there's only 200 or 300 copies. I'm probably going to be okay dropping $15 to $20 for that 20-page book, right? Like
Mhm.
that's what the market currently is. Now you look at something like the latest issue of Glarien that I have. There was an early bird price that I think was $16 for it. It's a 44-page book. It's being printed on cardstock covers. It's got high pound glossy pages on the interior. So just the print specs are way better than any book that you're going to get in the direct market, unless it's one of those high-end exclusive covers. And and the print run of this. So Glarien will be a larger print run. It'll be over around like a 3,000 print run for the third issue, but the individual variants range from 200 to 300 copies that we will print of each of those variants. So in that context, $16 for a 44-page book. I mean, if you look at a 44-page book in the market, most are already going to be probably like $8.99
Yep.
to $9.99 for a 40-page book. So when you're getting the smaller print run, the better cardstock cover, like you're getting a better quality product from the tactile sense. Um, that to me that doesn't feel like that's exorbitant pricing, right? Like it feels very much in line with things. So, but still, $16 seems like a lot for a comic for some people. Um, what I will also say, and this goes back, and we go back to the direct market, comics, and this is a hard thing for comic fans to hear, are way too cheap, um, except for Marvel and DC. The problem is the market is priced around whatever Marvel and DC price their books for. And it's unrealistic expectations for a company that's printing 3 to 10,000 copies of their book to be pricing it the same as a company that's printing 20 to 100,000 copies of their book, because the economics of scale are so different.
Mhm.
But if you see a book, a 22-page book that's $6.99, people are like, oh my God, that's horrible in the direct market. But honestly, for like, let's just take a company like Vault, which does pretty well. For Vault to make the same profit margin as as Marvel or DC, they would probably have to be going $6.99 for a same issue that Marvel would sell at $3.99. And if you go to a smaller company, and even Boom probably should be a dollar more than a Marvel or DC book, just based on economics of scale. And if you go to a smaller company, if you go to Ahoy, if you go to, like, those books really should be $7.99 for that same issue if they're going to sustain themselves based on the same profit margin. So, but they can't, because that market won't bear it. Everything in the direct market has to be kind of the same price point, because that's what people are used to, which is a really interesting dynamic, and it's not something that you see in other industries, right? I don't know, do you drink beer? Are you a beer drinker?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, but if you go to pick up a pack of Budweiser, do you expect it to be the same price as Sam Adams, or the same price as that microbrew from a pub? You don't, right? And you're willing to pay more because it's a different kind of product, even though they're both beer, even though they're both 12 ounces, right? Same, you could use wine if you want to use wine, same thing. And you know, so like that's how it functions in other markets. Based on the cost to produce, the person puts the price on, and people either buy it or they don't. But in the direct market, everything seems to have to be in the same pigeonhole, because otherwise the retailers go crazy, because the market was built on just Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
And so when that's what the market is built on, and everything else is kind of shoehorned in, you have to conform to that market. Whereas Kickstarter and some of these other direct to consumer markets, and Zoop and whatever that have sprung up, have been built from the ground up to support the price points of those products.
Well, and people forget. I remember a conversation with a friend from years ago that people forget that ad revenue goes into the big two as well. Some of that
Yeah.
is incestuous, I know, but that is a part of it, because there was a conversation. I wish I could just pull it up and send it to people, but I believe it's Tom Brevoort was talking about it. They even tried doing OGNs, and I have them on that shelf behind me. They're really great. And a lot of people have said, well, why doesn't Marvel just do that? Screw the single issues. And it's because the economics don't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the economics of even a big two book is you need to put out the single issue for $2.99, $3.99, get the ad revenue off of it, even if that's from uh, a lot of times DC Studios or Marvel Studios, just sending money downward. It doesn't matter. Just the money needs to be there. And then once the book's over, you get the additional revenue from a trade that will get even more of an audience, get into a bookstore, and so on and so forth. All that together leads to a successful book, not just single issues, not just a trade or an OGN. And a lot of people forget that. It's because when you buy an image book or you buy a Boom book, there's no ads in those books.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, what you need is, you need to pay for your art costs.
Yeah.
And that's what the single issues often do. I've paid for all the costs to create the book through the single issues. Now, when I sell this trade, the only costs I'm paying for are printing, right? And
Nice.
and when you're printing those to scale, those books can drop down to under a dollar a piece, and then if it's $20, and then you're splitting, Marvel is now making $8 per book. And so, yeah, there's real profit that comes through that way.
Yeah, and so you've been doing the White Ash books for a while now, and I know in the past when you were working with Scout, we had a conversation about specifically film and TV and how that was important to the model to get things options and try to get the next, not necessarily next big thing, but just the next thing in the people's hands, and that will lift up the brand. Do you feel like that's possible in the Kickstarter realm?
So, so yes, I, I, as someone who lives in Los Angeles, who had a life that predated my comics experiences, working in animation and film and things like that, I have seen a shift in the industry where Kickstarter space was something that people ignored in the past. And now there are people from development companies who are going through Kickstarters. So this is definitely because, look, if X production company in Los Angeles can find a gem from a Kickstarter creator who's not affiliated with a publisher, it's going to be a lot cheaper for them to acquire the rights to that book, because if they reach out to that creator probably doesn't have an entertainment lawyer. That creator probably doesn't have a producer quote. You know, well, Boom already has their own deal. So depending on what the studio, what the publisher is, if and by that I mean Boom already has a distribution deal. They distribute through a certain production company, a certain studio. I think they were with Sony. I don't know if they still are, but if let's say it's Aftershock, because I think Aftershock has well, maybe not Aftershock. Let's move away from Aftershock. AWA. Let's go with AWA. AWA can go to any of the studios with a title and say, hey, we've got this great new book. Would you guys like to do something with it? And the studios say yes. AWA already has a producer quote, and their producer quote might be $25,000 per episode that they'll get. Now, if it's, Travis, we'll go back to Travis, whose books I love, so we can just promote him a little bit. If the same production company finds one of Travis's books, broke down in Four Dead Bodies, and like, I want that one, they can talk to Travis and be like, hey, Travis, we love your book. We want to option it. They would come up with an IP licensing fee for Travis. Travis could ask to be put on as a producer. They might say yes. They might not say yes. But if they do, his producer fee is probably going to be $3,000 to $5,000 per episode, And so all of a sudden, over time, that's so much cheaper. And Travis won't have the same weight as a company that has other things optioned or has representation to be able to get a deal done. And so the terms will be more favorable. So I think from the production company side, there are a lot of reasons for them to start looking at Kickstarter, especially as the content has gotten better. And the more big profile, like the fact that Good Omens was a Kickstarter after it was this hit Amazon series, is for sure bringing more production development eyes that way. When Brandon Sanderson dropped his Kickstarter campaign and raised $44 million for novels, right? For 4 novels, which was insane, biggest Kickstarter of all time. A lot of people in the publishing industry started taking Kickstarter seriously in a way they hadn't been before. So anytime that you have these big breakout things, it gets the public attention. And if there's anything that production companies are looking for, it's cheap way to acquire good content. So I know from conversations I've had, they are now looking there. So yes, you know, I mean, I will even say that predating my time at Scout and after my time at Scout, I've had conversations with numerous companies that had nothing to do with the Scout version of the book. It was all about either through us reaching out to production companies or production companies reaching out to my manager about the things that I was doing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting when we see the first domino fall in that and where it leads. Because like you said, I mean, I know you were a big part of you were part of the writer's strike, and you were out there and you're doing your
Mm-hmm.
thing. And that led to good things for creators, especially writers in this case. But it also came with a reality from places like Netflix, where like you were getting things on the cheap for so long, and now you have to actually start paying people. And I mean, hopefully, from my point of view, that leads to less content, because I do think that we got a gluttony of content right now, and it's just gotten out of control as a consumer. But it will also mean the Malar stuff is a little bit more expensive, guys. Like, and so far we haven't seen the big shift that we wanted from it. Maybe we do go to Pat Shand and start talking about making some cheeky comics into into
Yeah,
Netflix
I mean,
shows.
look like if you look at the old Showtime model, right? Like I feel like the whole cheeky universe would fit very well on like the the late night Showtime. Um, but even even like Game of Thrones or whatever, like there's plenty of content. I think that is adult that will find a home.
Yeah,
But yeah, I do think that you're going to see more good creators signing production deals, which then in turn let them do more things in the Kickstarter space. Or if they want to do something someplace else, they can do that as well. But and then I say, make sure if someone approaches you from a production company, get yourself a good entertainment lawyer, or at least a comic book lawyer, and there are ones that you can find.
yeah. So looking out there in the world of comics, I know I know you've had some thoughts on some of the publishers out there. Do you think we're due for a big sweeping blow in the direct market with some of these smaller tier publishers? They're doing too much, or could possibly go away, or how do you feel that's been going?
Well, let me just start by saying, I hope that everyone gets healthy and the
Yes.
market grows to a place where it can support everyone who's in it right now. That said, if I had to like put my crystal ball hat on, I think, yeah,
Yeah.
but I think right now the market got flooded with too much content. There's too many books on the shelves for the pocketbooks of people who go into the store to be able to buy the content. I think sadly a lot of stores are closing. Right here in Los Angeles, we just lost Heidi Ho, which is one of the oldest comic book shops in all of California. Jeffrey's Comics just closed. In New York, Pulp 716 just closed down. There were a couple of others that just recently closed. There was I just saw an article about it the other day. It's really sad when you're seeing the comic book shops close down, but less comic book shops also translate to less outlets to pick up stuff from the publishers. I do think that it is likely that we're going to see some contraction of publishers and a couple of publishers go away, maybe even some of the bigger ones. I don't want to speculate on names, but if you look at earnings reports that are published, you can see some publishers are having a hard time. If you talk to shops in the market, if you go and talk to stores, they can tell you which publishers are selling, which aren't. And when you have entire publishers that are no longer just being put on the shelves, but they're only being ordered to pull through stores, like that's going to be really hard. And so I think the publishers that are going to survive are the ones. Let me rephrase that. The smaller publishers that are going to survive are the ones that either have great content, great products, good stories, good creators they're working with, and they shrink their line to focus on promoting those creators, or they do that and they also start exploring the other channels. I will say that I've had numerous smaller publishers talk to me about consulting in terms of them going to Kickstarter as a place to support what they do. And because I think you're going to see more publishers going to Kickstarter, more publishers spending time on Whatnot or whatever of these other direct to consumer sales channels to try to supplement the income they're losing by the comic shops not ordering as much of their content. But ultimately, I do feel the market would be a little healthier overall with less books. And
Yep.
whether that means publishers shrinking their line and everyone doing that accordingly according to their size, to reach that new equilibrium, or if one or two publishers need to go away and other publishers, shrink their output. I think that's likely what's going to happen, because the current market isn't sustaining the number of publishers that we have with the number of books they're putting out.
Yeah, I point to Vault and Mad Cave as my two examples right now of smaller publishers doing it right. And I think Vault has a benefit of having bigger name creators as a part of their books. And then I think Vault just grew the correct way and started really small and was putting out a couple books, and then through things like talent searches found monster hits like Nottingham, and are now putting out books with with Pose, who's working at Marvel, and all these, and then they're getting these great IPs in, but not over flooding that. They just got a couple right now. I just think that these two publishers in particular have stood out to me in that realm of ones that have done it correctly, as opposed to just flooding me with 30 books every time I open previews of
Yeah,
stuff that I probably don't care about.
100%. And you're talking about Mad Cave with like they just got Flash Gordon, they just Pepos, and like, so like that's, yeah, Mad Cave's great. Vault has done some smart things too. I think when you get funding in, and some of these publishers have funding, it's how you spend that money, right?
Yeah.
How are you promoting? Vault's tried a lot of things that I think have been interesting. One of their most recent books with the Chris Yost, they gave out, like, basically it was free to retailers. So
Yeah, same with the was
the
it
Zach Kaplan
Kaplan's?
book,
Yeah,
yes,
Kaplan's the
first
book,
issue of
yeah.
that book, yeah. And so they're when they're giving out the first issue for free, and you can afford to do that, like, that's interesting marketing. That's where they're putting their money. But even then, like, if you look at Mad Cave and Vault over the last 2 or 3 years, the number of titles they were putting out in a given month were never, over 12 for Vault. And like Mad Cave is more always been in like the 4 to 8 range.
I love where
And
Mad Cave sits in that
yeah,
they're a couple, but they're quality.
yeah, no, and I've
Yeah.
talked to a lot of the people at Mad Cave. They're really smart, and they're trying to grow the company in the right way. And I think that when you look at that, again, you're doubling down on the books that you have there. You're trying to figure out how can we maximize the visibility of these books? Can we bring in better creators? And you slowly ramp up. I think if you're a smaller creator and you're still putting out 15 to 25 books a month, that's not going to be good for you long term, and it's definitely not good for your creators short term. Any creator who's at a company that has mostly unknown names in comics that's putting out over 20 books a month, that's going to cannibalize its line, because the stores are not going to order all of those books, and you're as a creator there, your numbers are going to go way down.
Yeah. So, Charlie, you've been super generous with your time, but I
Yeah,
assume you want to talk about Glarien a little bit.
for sure, for sure. Like we got. I think depending on when this goes, we'll probably have another 15 to 18 days on the Kickstarter campaign. Glarien, just for those of you who don't know, it's the origin story of the world's most dangerous elf, told through the eyes of a young woman in 1970s New York who's having visions of being this elf warrior from 3,000 years ago. I like to say it's Red Sonja meets Taxi Driver, but with elves and demons. If you like seeing a badass elf, and yes, this is a little bit more adult. Like the White Ash universe is PG-13 with some R-rated characters that come to visit. Glarien's one of those R-rated characters. This is just, I will say that this origin, like the first couple of pages of the book, are some of the most that are in that not safe for work realm, but it's inherent to her character because it is kind of a coming of age story. And then you can say this is the woman Rachel who is talking to her psychiatrist about like this traumatic event, and ultimately it's about these two different women who have just gone through these life-altering tragedies 3,000 years apart, and how they are connected. And over the course of the miniseries, you will see how these two women come together, how they are connected, and it also pays off a piece of the past of White Ash, which is our other grounded fantasy universe, think Romeo and Juliet meets Lord of the Rings in rural Pennsylvania. Um, and again, it's just part of one gigantic tapestry, a story that we're telling throughout the ages. Um,
Yeah, and first off, when I was looking through the campaign the other day, the first thing that popped out to me is, damn, that's a lot of preview pages. So you really put your money where your mouth is there.
yeah, well, like my thought on a Kickstarter preview section, if you can, and this comes down to what creators can afford, how long your book is. I mean, I think that's a 15-page preview of the first issue. We're on the third issue right now. The first issue is 40 pages, so there's another 25 pages left in that issue. I like to think of it as if you're watching a TV show and you have that amazing cold open, which is like the things that happens before the credits come in,
Mhm.
that kind of hooks you for the episode. Like I'm trying to do that with my Kickstarter pages. So like my project for the game, I think either had a 10 or a 12-page preview. I want to put enough there so when you come fresh to what I do, you see it and you know if this is the book for you. You see the quality of the art, you can read the writing, you get a sense of the characters, the story, the tone, and it's all right there. And hopefully there's enough of it that's going to hit a point in the narrative that hooks you in.
Yeah, and I mean, it does benefit that you're doing longer issues, so to do 15 pages
Yes.
is, less of the
It's
book than if
right, right, right. If it was a 20-page book and I was charging like $6 for a PDF, you're like, I'm getting a PDF for like 4 pages. Like, what's the deal here? No. Yeah, like the first issue was 40 pages. The one we're doing right now is a 44-page issue. And when I say 44-page issue, that's all story. If we add any extras or pinups or things, the book will get longer. But there
Mhm.
are 44 pages of story, and that's one thing I do love about Kickstarter is it gives me the luxury of telling longer issues. I'm not confined to that 20-page dynamic. So more things can happen, and especially in a story like this where you're jumping back and forth between the two time periods and you have parallel narratives running. I like to have more space to be able to tell and show actions that are commenting on each other, and to do that in a way that doesn't feel rushed, that feels it's intrinsic. The pace of the book is intrinsic to the pace of the narrative that you want to tell. Sometimes you need more pages.
Yeah, I, recently Gods came out from Marvel, and I was talking about that on the show where it's a big book, like, it's a
Hmm.
lot of pages, and it is a full story in one page or in one, issue, and what was great about that is having that all there. I felt so that was literally a quick insight into me is I try to read anywhere from 3 to 5 comics in a night. That's not always possible, but, like, that's usually my goal, and I sat down that night and read that and was just like, "That's it. That's the book I read tonight," because
Yeah.
it was so deep and intrinsic as opposed to your average 22 issue comic where it's very digestible in and out. And it sounds to me that's what Galarian's doing uh
Sure.
in the
For
series.
sure. Okay, and I will say, like, I've done a lot of writing in my career, and from comics to other medium, and I do this story in particular has been one of the most fulfilling to tell, but also one of the most challenging structurally to make it work. Because again, like I said, it's two different parallel stories. You're trying to find the right points to go back and forth between the stories. You're trying to pace the narratives of each so they're working in concert with the other, and make each of those stories dynamic in a way that the reader's not like, ugh, it's this. I'm going quickly through this story because I want to get back to Glarien, or like, oh, the Rachel story is so much more interesting, and just trying to make sure it balances itself. So as a writer, it's been a really rewarding book to write, and I would say this issue, as much as I've enjoyed the first two, was my favorite one to write at this point. It's the funniest, it's got the most action, it's the sexiest for people who like that. But it's a lot is happening right now because the first two issues we were really kind of teasing a lot of the connection, and here the worlds are overlapping a little bit more in this third issue. So I get to do a lot of fun things, and working with Romina is also just amazing. Anytime that you have an artist that constantly pluses what you do,
Mhm.
that's what I like to work with, and I'm very fortunate that's what I get to do.
And I remember from a previous conversation, I'm pretty sure this was you, so correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah.
But talking about having the sexy scenes in there and having both the lead characters being female, it was important for you for the artist to also be a woman. Has that worked out the way you wanted it to? Do you feel like she's added that
Yeah,
femininity to it that makes it work?
I think it comes down to sometimes it comes down to camera placement
Mhm.
for intent, and just how a scene is being handled. So for certain sequences, like anything that's choreography, if it's a sex scene, if it's a fight scene, um, I'm a little bit more hands off in terms of the direction because I think those things need to flow on the page. And so, there's a scene in this one. I said a little bit sexier, but there's actually two parallel sex scenes that are taking place in this next issue. um, and we're cutting back and forth between the two of them. And part of the intent is to show the different dynamics in terms of how sexuality impacts both of their lives. But even though that they have very different perspectives, at the end they kind of both end up in the same place. It's so like it's, but that's the kind of thing where I'll be like, okay, we have these 3 or 4 key panels that we need to hit in this 2-page spread, but the rest is up to you. And show what you want, handle this in the way that you think is the most appropriate for the scene. And so I do think anytime, if you want to be respectful in terms of what you're doing, if you're not trying to be gratuitous, like look, there's plenty. If you go to Kickstarter, there's plenty of not safe for work books that are selling because they are not safe for work books. And I'm not saying that there aren't people who buy this book because that's not what because that's not their main focus. Like, oh, book, here's another book that goes into not safe for work content. But if you look, we look at our covers and you can scroll through, like there's no nude covers. Most of the covers are, like I love this one, like
That's great.
like, and the one that we have in the background from Skylar is insane. It's like this beautiful, beautiful, the one like on the background of this
This was one of my
screen.
favorites.
Yeah, Luca's great.
Yeah.
I think like there's like this, we had the fun cosplay covers that we did for the shoot. And then yeah, like this is the one I was talking about. So like, these are not overly sexualized covers for the most part. They are showing different aspects of the creator because I don't want to be advertising this book. I don't want people to be buying this book because you're just looking for a not safe for work book. I want people who are buying this book, because you love the character Glarien, because you want to learn more about her origin story, because you want to, see more parts of the White Ash universe. That said, we're going to go into some content. It's like Game of Thrones. Look, there was plenty of nudity in Game of Thrones. And sure, that's why some people watch the show,
Yep.
right? But it's not like you can't find nudity everywhere on the internet. Um, you came back to Game of Thrones because you love the content, and some of it was trying to shock you, some of it was trying to titillate you, some of it was trying to excite you in different ways as part of that universe. And so for me, if it's organic to the story, it should be there. I don't want to limit the narratives that I'm telling based on trying to hit a certain age rating. We're just going to tell the story that needs to be told. So
Yeah, what I loved about each cover, and then even into the book when I was looking through the preview pages and everything, she's so we're all in this world creatures, with some exceptions obviously, but creatures that have sexual habits, and it's a part of our life and it's part of our story. And so there's definitely a place, like you said, in storytelling for that. Doing it right is very tough. I think movies and TV do it very poorly a lot. But what I liked about it was at no point did I see her in any of these images as an object. And as a matter of fact, I specifically used this background because A, it was one of my favorite covers, but B, I love the imagery of her there in the flames, just looking badass, ready to fight, ready to go, ready to protect and do what she needs to do. And I didn't think that even with the cosplay cover that you could look at and say it's a cosplay cover, and it's a lot of cosplay photo shoots can be used to be titillating, and that's how some of those cosplay people make their money, and whatever, good on them for what they do. But even that one, it seemed like the focus was on this character's a warrior. This character is someone who can hold their own.
Well, and to that end, like Shayna Feely, who is the photographer, this woman, she did all the costuming for it. She cast the models. She went off and did it and just sent me photos. So it's like, it was a wonderful thing where it was like a whole, woman-led team going off and doing it and coming back with pictures of, of Glarien. And it was like, I loved it. And she did multiple costumes, work with different models. And so that was, for me, it was wonderful. But even like, like the opening scene where there's a lot of nudity in the opening scene, I remember early on, I was talking with Romina, who's the artist, and I was like, should she maybe throw something on? And she wrote back to me, she's like, I don't think she would take time in a battle to put stuff on, and I don't think she cares. And I'm like, you're right on both counts, right? And so like when your artist is like, no, like this woman doesn't care. She's in a battle, she's fighting. She doesn't care if anyone sees any of her bits because it doesn't matter to her. And that's also the core of the character. Like there's this, it's part of like the story that's going on here is like that arrogance of youth when you are 19, 20, 21, and you feel like you are the center of the universe. And that extends to your sexuality, extends to just your persona, and you feel like you can do no wrong. And so we're coming in on that moment in the beginning here in those opening pages where, like this demon's erupting and like she doesn't care because she knows she's Glarien and she's going to take this thing out and save the day. And then things don't quite go that way. And like, and so that changes the trajectory of her life. And I think, like that aura of invulnerability going away is something that we all experience at some point. And it shapes, and how it goes away, when it goes away, shapes the path of our life going forward. And, and so this is for her, it's a coming of age story as that, that aura is pierced and she has to regroup and rebuild who she is going forward based on that. And, and like, will that moment come back thematically? Probably. That's the kind of writer I am. So like, like that choice in the beginning maybe will be able to be revisited later on and we can see her growth, like things like that. Like these are important key moments in the lives of these characters, and that's where we're coming in this moment in time where they're both dealing with the aftermath of things going horribly wrong.
Definitely. So yeah, I'm really enjoying everything I'm seeing from the book. It just looks, I mean, obviously I know you, so I know it's very thoughtful and that you've done a lot behind the scenes to make sure that it's the intent is there to the best of your ability and all of that. And I love seeing the White Ash universe kind of growing and growing as it goes. I mean, I remember talking to you back in the Scout days and where it was, and then to see your campaign as we sit here today recording at over 1,000 backers and $3,500. Like that's amazing. And you still have how many days? 17 to go. So when people are listening to this, it'll be about 10 days to go. Have you reached any like stretch goals? Do you do that kind of thing on Kickstarter when you
Yeah.
do yours?
So we've already unlocked one stretch goal. I think the first stretch goal was we're doing a poster of the A cover, 11 by 17 poster of the A cover, because I kind of wanted to get rid of some of the logos so you could see everything that Romina had done, because there's a lot going on in that A cover where you can see like the two worlds coming together. Like with the dancers behind. So like there's going to be an 11 by 17 poster of this that's going to be in every package. We are about to unlock, and I'll tell you because we're here, and by the time this has dropped, we're going to do a chrome foil cover of Skylar's cover, which is the one in the background. And
Ooh,
we're going to be randomly giving that away to 5 people who have backed the campaign. And then it will also be available as an add-on, a limited number, probably somewhere in the realm of only 50 that will print up, that people can add. And I think that's a beautiful cover to have as a chrome foil. It's just really going to pop with
yeah.
all the sparks and the flames.
Yeah, that one's gonna
Um,
work really well in that format.
yeah, and so like, but yes, I have plenty of stretch goals that we will be rolling out. That hopefully by the time that this campaign is live, a few more of them will have been unlocked. I always like to reinvest back in the things that we're making, and if we ever do like a new cover, we also, rather than just have it as an add-on, I give it away randomly to some people who backed it. So it's one of those things where if you back things, sometimes you get this extra cover, and if you really want it, you can also buy it too.
That's awesome stuff. What about add-ons? Is there any like special add-ons in your campaign or?
So we have, I mean, like with all my campaigns, you can always catch up on anything. So we have lots of catch up packs as standard tiers. In terms of add-ons, we have the White Ash trade paperback. We have the Glarien Short and Deadly hardcover. Um, Usually, what I do is after the Kickstarter campaign through BackerKit, I have everything available from the White Ash catalog. So if there's any variant covers that you're looking for previous campaigns, we have pins, we have custom decks of White Ash playing cards, we have everything in the universe. I put that all there because right now, as much as Kickstarter has done to work on their interface, their post-campaign fulfillment tools are not still where they need to be.
Oh,
Um, and so that's where I go to a place like BackerKit, which helps me create package groups. And they're like, okay, there are 75 backers that get these things. So you can just pack those boxes and then stick the labels on them and ship them out. Whereas Kickstarter just gives you a giant spreadsheet. And you have to do all that work on your own. And so, so I leave a lot of the add-ons to BackerKit where it can be just organized better.
interesting. Yeah, I gotta imagine at this point, as far as the series has gone in terms of the bigger White Ash universe, you're like the amount of different packages has got to be crazy at this point.
It is even crazier still. I do all of it myself. I really should be outsourcing, and it's something that I'm looking into, or at least getting my kids old enough so I can outsource it to them.
Yeah,
Um,
child labor.
that's exactly. But I will in the next 3 weeks be sending out another 1,000 packages for our Glarien Short and Deadly hardcover that was a previous campaign. So like that's a lot of mailing to do. And yeah, when you look at the backer kit does you hit the button, it's like create package groups. I'm like, okay, 275 different configurations. Yep. And like your first 5 or 6 configurations, like 150 of these, 200 of these. And then you have like, I don't know, 75 that are completely unique. And that's where it takes time to create all those packages.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
I
So
mean, not that I'm complaining because, like when you have these big campaigns, obviously it means there's a lot of revenue coming in and not every creator can do that. So I would never complain about the number of backers or packages that I have to mail out because that just means people are buying things.
these are good problems to have
The
and
best problems.
complaints that we love to hear. That's what
Yes.
it is. So, Charlie, I mean, is there anything else you want to add about the campaign before we do our little send off? Pretty.
No, I mean, just like, look, again, we're running till November 15th. So, check it out. If you want to get caught up on the White Ash universe, we have plenty of tiers there. We even have a White Ash universe collection where you can get everything White Ash, everything the game, and our other series, How I Slept My Way Through College and Other Tales from Freshman Year. Oh, and we do have a couple of gift boxes left. And these are gift boxes that you can mail to your fantasy loving friends, and they will ship out in time for the holidays. They will ship out the first week in December to make sure that they get to places. So people can open them, put them under their tree, put them by their candles, or wherever you're putting your holiday boxes. And yeah, so.
What better gift to give than the gift of white ash?
Yeah, that's what I think. And they come in beautiful gift boxes, but in general, comics are a great gift.
Yes, definitely. Although I've tried with my sister a few times and it always lands flat. Uh,
But for Chris, they are a great gift.
oh, trust. Look at behind me.
I know. We should
Like,
all send Chris gift boxes of comics. Just saying. If you're watching this channel and you
I,
haven't sent Chris a gift box yet, now's the
I,
time.
I'm not going to complain. I mean, I'll say that. Uh, so, Charlie, once again, been super generous with your time, so I appreciate it. But before
Yeah,
we
no.
take off, I know that you're like me and you make terrible life decisions like spending time on Twitter and whatnot. So, where can people
Yes.
follow you on those places?
So on the platform formerly known as Twitter, I am under Charles Stickney. I also have a Charlie Stickney on Blue Sky. There is a White Ash Comics on Twitter as well. And you can also follow White Ash Comics on Facebook and on Instagram.
And everybody out there listening and or watching, check those show notes for links to the Glarien issue 3 campaign and all the other cool stuff that I can find that Charlie's done. So, Charlie, thanks so much for spending the time here tonight talking to me. It's been awesome. And
I
I look forward
appreciate
to the
it.
next time.
Yeah. Talk soon. Thank you so much.